Well, this got out of control quickly, but let's get right into it. In blue are Sportsnet's projected top 15 prospects, not necessarily a mock draft. In red are the mock draft picks of Craig Button of TSN. And while I don't always agree with his picks, I there are times where he'll talk about players, and I'm thinking I don't think we watched the same guy, and I mean that more from a professional point than an amateur point. He seems to scout amateurs really well. Um, I also included his quotes from his official um, write up, his scouting report, if you will, on these players. In black, that's the Central Scouting Bureau. That's their ratings. And in brown underneath is the International Scouting Service and their final ratings for players. Everybody agrees Rasmus Dahlin is number one, and according to Craig Button, he's the best since Potvin. Number two, Svechnikov, reminds Craig Button of Hossa. There's no argument with those two picks. 3 and 4 could go either way. Philip Zadina, Brady Tkachuk. Sportsnet has them at 3 and 4. They're 3 and 4 on Craig Button's list, but the Central Scouting Bureau has Brady Tkachuk ahead of Philip Zadina. And I've heard that with the way Tkachuk's played at the end of the year, Tkachuk's kind of moved past him, but we'll find out. Whether you get an elite scoring winger of Zadina or a guy who makes teams better in Brady Tkachuk, you're doing pretty well. And number 5, Adam Boquist is the one that's rated. Quinn Hughes is the one that gets this spot for on the list for Craig Button. It says he's a well-rounded player. The interesting thing is Quinn Hughes is 9 here, according to Sportsnet. Adam Boquist, he doesn't have him getting drafted till 10th. If Adam Boquist drops to 10th to the Oilers are doing a happy dance, to be completely honest. Evan Bouchard at 6 or Wahlstrom. Smart and efficient is what he says about Evan Bouchard. The agreement at 7 seems to be Noah Dobson. That he says he'll complement the young Canuck forwards. Now, if you look at the ratings, Quinn Hughes is a reach at 9, but not by much. And I've said this before, that after 4, they really could be almost... it could be really tough to pick who gets picked where. And past 10, it's just whatever. Wahlstrom's 5, Dobson's 8, Bouchard is 6. Kokaniemi is the one that Craig Button says is going to get taken at 8th, who he compares to Kopitar and Taves is probably on his way down the depth chart over the next few years for Chicago. So if they can get a Taves replacement, or at the very least an excellent two-way center, they're ahead of the game. He has Wahlstrom going at 9 instead of where he's on the Sportsnet list. He's number 7 on the International Scouting Service, number 6 North American skater, according to Central Scouting Bureau. Barrett Hayden goes at 10. I'm telling you, though, if Boquist is there. Barrett Hayden goes at 11, according to the mock draft of Craig Button. Bodie Wild at 12. Doesn't show up until 14 on the Sportsnet list. Joe Veleno is 13 on the Sportsnet prospect list. And he goes at 15, according to Craig Button. Smart, determined. Bodie Wild, can play in almost any... Or Joel Farabee can play in almost any spot. Bodie Wild's a impact blue liner. Barrett Hayden is a complete center. And this is interesting, because if the New York Islanders drafted Hayden and Bodie Wild, they would kind of follow what I said yesterday, which would be a center and a defenseman. Now, where it gets weird is anything outside of that. And I'm not going to get into all of this because it's just, honestly, I just kept writing. And now that I'm doing this video, I'll just go over what I'm going to talk about and what I'm not. Goaltenders. People ask me about goaltenders. It really depends on what your team needs, but there are none projected to go in the first round this year. Jakub Skarek seems to be the likely number one, but Olivier Rodriguez is also on this list. Depending on whether you trust scouting reports that have him at 2nd or 1st, Lucas Dostal, Jed Alexander are in the top 10 according to certain reports. Um, Justus Anunen, who's out of Finland, he's number 6 on some. Jacob Ingham is on that list as well. And the one that I've got in brackets here is David Tendek, who played for the Vancouver Giants this year. Played pretty darn well, and we don't know where he's going to go in the draft. He would likely go later if he gets drafted at all. Goaltenders generally don't attract a lot of interest at the draft because it takes them longer to develop, and you really don't know what you're getting. I mean, look, this is 10 guys, 11, 12 guys altogether, and there's no way of knowing right now which one's going to be any good at the professional level. And some GM somewhere is going to take a chance on a guy like Akira Schmid or Jakob Kaczarski or Jacob Kaczarski. I'm getting thrown off with European and North Americans. Jacob Kaczarski. And they could look like a genius later, or they might look like a fool for taking an Alexis Gravel at third round. And it is so hard to project goaltenders that it's like they've just said forget it. Interesting side note: there was a CHL rule brought in to curb European goaltenders coming over and taking North American goaltenders' jobs at the junior level some years ago. I haven't heard whether it's been repealed, but there's been talk of repealing it and allowing European goaltenders back into the league. And really, what it comes down to is this: where are the goalies in the first round? There aren't any. So clearly, the plan, which was to make sure that Canadian and American kids got those jobs, it's not leading to more elite North American level goaltenders. So they're ready to kind of scrap it. Some other interesting ones: Grigory Denisenko is an interesting one that's not necessarily on this list. Martin Kaut, I'm probably butchering that name, and I've probably butchered others. Martin Kaut was 11th on the European list at middle of the season. He's now number 4 on the European list. He could end up in this top 15. Rasmus Kupari dropped from 6th till 11th, and that's on Central Scouting Bureau's list between mid-season and the end of the season. Isaac Lundstrom dropped from 3rd to 8th, and Vitaly Kravtsov went from 10th to 3rd, and there's a lot of buzz about Kravtsov. And Kravtsov, to me, sounds like the kind of guy Florida will take a shot at. It really does. These guys that bully their way up through the lineup like I'm going to be a top prospect. That's the kind of guy that it feels like Florida would take, or maybe Philly. Like Bodie Wild wouldn't make any sense. Farabee, who's a left winger, would make some sense for Philly. So I agree with those picks there. I don't know that Bodie Wild goes that early. The reports are that he's number 17 North America. He's ranked 20th on the ISS list. But again, once you get past 10, there's no real consensus on who's going to finish where. Ryan Merkley is a good example. Sportsnet had him at 31, and they said he's not going to go anywhere near here, but we feel that he has the talent and the skill to be, this good. And yet, he's number 45 on the North American list on the Central Scouting Bureau's page. Somebody on this list is going to be a steal. Adam Ginning, European Union. I knew I was going to say that. EU meaning European. From Europe, number 5 European listed prospect, number 25 on this list. So ISS, who knows where he goes? He's a defenseman. It's this year's draft is going to be very, very interesting. And as we get closer to said draft, then I'll do a mock draft of all of round 1. But we don't know who's drafting where past the top 15. Okay, top 23, I think we know where everybody's drafting. But still, I want to wait until we have an ability to put all 31 teams on the board, and then we can go through and do a draft. Actually, it would be kind of fun to do something as a live stream where we can all kind of agree on where guys are going to go, maybe do polls. I don't know, something fun like that. Just so we can kind of predict before the draft takes place who's going where. Joe Veleno's the one that I find interesting because he is sliding. He has slid in this draft. And yet if you look at his number 8 rating in North American skaters, he was number 11 at the midway mark. So he has bumped up according to Central Scouting Bureau. He's number 10 on the International Scouting Services list, and yet he's projected at 13 on Sportsnet, and Craig Button's taking him to go at 15. So I still say that he could end up being somewhat of a steal. But let me know your picks. This is as close to a draft as I'm going to do, because there are just too many names. There are too many guys. There's too many different pieces still in motion, and we have so much more hockey to be decided at the NHL level, and then figure out where everybody's going to be drafting, because the Islanders could use those 2 picks to try to move up into here. Chicago may be willing to move down. They may try to move up. Philly's going to try to move up because it's Ron Hextall. And there are teams who may try to jump into the top 15, like a Toronto, because they may see a guy available at 14 or 15 and say, you know what? We think we got a player there. We're going to go ahead and jump in there. So this is just a general idea. Again, it seems the dividing line is the top 4. If you're drafting in the top 4, you're going to get pretty much a guy who should come in and play for you next year, barring any of them going to university. At 5, I'd be very surprised if Arizona doesn't get a defenseman who can play right away too. They did it with Chychrun. I'd be very surprised if whoever they draft at 5 this year doesn't end up joining the team right away too. Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this. And again, there's just too many players to go through right now. This is what I was worried about. This is what I was afraid of. And in all of its horrific glory, this is what happens when I try to figure out where everybody's going to get drafted. But if you're Buffalo, all you have to remember is the guy's name, those 2 words, and forget everything else, because he's going to improve Buffalo. But that remains to be seen, I guess, on some level, and we'll see what happens from here. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.